I'm Representative Nanette Barragan, and I call this meeting of the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee to order. Since taking office in January, Donald Trump and House Republicans have focused on all of the wrong things, all while the cost of living continues to go up and hurt families here in Pennsylvania and across the nation. House Democrats work for the American people, not billionaire donors. And that's why we're here today in Collegeville as part of a series of the House Democratic Steering and Policy hearings and roundtables across America to listen to your stories, hear what matters most to you, and take back what we learned to Washington as we fight back against the harmful policies of Donald Trump and House Republicans. Each of us has heard directly from people in our own districts that the high cost of food and health care, childcare, housing, and energy are making it harder to make ends meet. As Democrats, we are ready and willing to work across the aisle to deliver real solutions that make life more affordable. But Republicans are not interested in lowering costs. Time after time, they refuse the opportunity to work with us. They're focused on giving tax breaks to their richest donors on the backs of hardworking families, seniors, veterans, and children. Their one big bill may be beautiful for billionaires, but it's very ugly for working families. It will take health care away from tens of millions of Americans and raise costs for tens of millions more. It will cut school meals and take food assistance away from kids, from seniors, and people with disabilities. It will make home energy more expensive. The Trump budget goes even further. It strips rental assistance from families, and it cuts Head Start and child care funding that helps parents make ends meet. The American people simply cannot afford the one big ugly bill. And today's roundtable will explore exactly how harmful its impacts will be. We are deeply appreciative to Representative Madeleine Dean and her team for hosting us here today, and for Usinus College for their hospitality. And with that, I want to give a special thanks to our guests for being here today to talk about this critical issue, the cost of living crisis. You are not only experts on this problem, but you are a vital part of the solution. Through the work you do every day to support our neighbors in Southeastern Pennsylvania and by being here today. And Representative Dean will join us shortly. Now I'd like to yield to our co-chair, Representative Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be before you. The cost of living is too high. I don't have to tell you that. Everyone knows it. And yet it's only Democrats who seem to have a plan to bring it down. When Democrats were in the majority, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act to lower prices and invest in a better economy that works for everyone. That included capping the price of insulin to just $35 a month, lowering prescription drug costs across the board, and securing the largest clean energy investment in our history. Donald Trump said he would lower costs. He has done the literal exact opposite. The Trump tariffs are a tax on American consumers and businesses, and prices are already up on everything. My district is urban, suburban, and rural. I have 4,500 farms in my district and a part of the city of Chicago. And I'm hearing concerns from Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and I hate to say it, but people that don't vote. We don't like to hear that. And now Trump's big ugly bill will cut funding to basic needs programs that keep costs low for millions of Americans, cutting health care and food assistance. Also, he can bankroll, as my colleague said, his donors with his new tax breaks. In my district alone, if the bill goes through it like it is, 300,000 people will lose their health care. So a cost of living crisis is definitely in the making, one we must stop. And that's why we're here today. And I just want to thank all of you for being here today also. And I yield to my co-chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Co-Chair Kelly. House Democrats have held meetings on Capitol Hill and across the country to listen to the American people. Just last week, we heard from veterans in Virginia. Earlier this year, we heard from Social Security and Medicaid recipients. We talked to workers who were fired by the Trump administration, as well as small business leaders. Today's roundtable discussion will be a candid conversation about the cost of living crisis, one that Donald Trump has manufactured himself. We'll hear from leaders, who we're so glad have joined us, who do all they can to meet the needs of Pennsylvanians who face housing, food, and financial insecurity. And we'll make clear that while Republicans stand for restricting basic needs programs, Democrats will always fight to defend, and expand them. The battle over values that's before us is as clear as day, and we sincerely thank you all for being here. Now I'd like to begin the introductions. We're joined today by Dr. Max Cooper. Dr. Cooper represents the best of what is right and good about America. He's a public servant, an emergency physician, and a Nether Providence commissioner. Dr. Cooper has also cared for his fellow men and women in uniform, having served in the United States Navy and working at a combat trauma hospital in Afghanistan. Here in Pennsylvania, he co-founded a free medical clinic in Upper Darby and continues to be a champion for health care. What Donald Trump is doing to health care in this country is an absolute atrocity. He wants to kick 16 million people off of their health care so he can give tax breaks to his billionaire donors. His one big ugly bill will force rural hospitals to close. It will trigger the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. It will kill people, and that is not an exaggeration, and immediately skyrocket the cost of health care for millions of people. People will have to choose between seeing a doctor or paying rent. And what do Republicans in Congress have to say about this one big ugly bill? Well, Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa says, "We are all going to die." Are you serious? That's all Republicans have to say? And then she doubled down and sarcastically asked if she was going to have to let people know that the tooth fairy doesn't exist. The callous indifference of Republicans when it comes to the life and death issues that people face with their health care is appalling. If you do not have health care coverage, it means you can't go to the doctor. It means by the time you can go to the doctor, you have to be so sick that you have to use the emergency room for that care. And you are likely diagnosed at a much later stage and have more health complications that, by the way, are also more expensive and that are usually passed on to the rest of Americans. That is unacceptable. Leaders like Dr. Cooper know exactly what cuts to programs like Medicaid and Medicare will mean to communities here in Pennsylvania. He has seen firsthand the power of investing in affordable health care that heals the sick, treats the wounded, and protects our kids and seniors. Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for joining us today. You're recognized.
Thank you so much for having me. And before I get started with my remarks, I'd also like to especially thank Ursinus College. Many years ago when I was a high school student and considering which college to go to, I was this close to coming to Ursinus. And so while I didn't attend, it looms large in my mind, and it's really nice to be back on campus. So thank you all for hosting. Yes, as you kindly introduced, my name is Dr. Max Cooper. I'm an emergency medicine physician by training, and until recently I worked at Crozier-Chester Medical Center in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, which some of you may recognize from the news recently. As an ER doctor at this safety net hospital, I worked on the front lines of our social safety net, helping my patients navigate challenges ranging from homelessness to addiction to healthcare unaffordability, all while providing appropriate and timely medical care. And I was invited here today to discuss my experiences with Medicare and Medicaid, and I want to be as clear as possible that Medicare and Medicaid are the absolute backbone of our hospital finances, especially so for safety net hospitals like mine. I'll be discussing this more in a moment, but before I do, I'd like to just share a brief patient anecdote, which I have previously shared at the White House. I think it highlights really the positive effect that government intervention can have on people's lives. Several years ago, while working a typical shift in the emergency department, we received an advance warning on our command phone that there was a patient who had just collapsed just feet outside of our emergency department. And as we rushed to the ambulance bay to respond, he was being brought in by our paramedics and brought to Resuscitation 1, where we began our evaluation of him. We immediately found that he was in an unstable cardiac rhythm. Fortunately, he had only been pulseless for a few moments, and so we were able to shock his heart back to life. And because he had only been unconscious for moments before we were able to shock his heart, he woke up rather quickly, and we were able to ask him some questions as to what happened. As it turns out, he had been unable to afford his insulin, and so as a result of that, he had been rationing a number of his medications. And he knew the insulin was important, so he had continued to take that. And he knew some of the other medications that he took were important. But he didn't realize that his potassium supplementation was important, and all of his other medications lowered his potassium. And so because of this, his potassium became critically low. He was fortunate that when he went into this critical cardiac rhythm, he was literally feet from our hospital door, and we were fortunately able to shock him back to life. I have not seen any similar stories since we were able to cap the price of insulin just a few years ago. And so I think this is a really important thing to highlight. The laws that we pass, the administrative actions that our government takes, they have real-world consequences on our patients and neighbors. When discussing Medicare and Medicaid, I think people tend to view these programs through the lens of individual patient care. And while these programs are essential for making health care affordable for our elderly, for our disabled, for our destitute, and for our pregnant patients, we must understand that reductions in reimbursements or removing people from healthcare roles has larger systemic effects. These actions can have significant negative effects on the finances of our hospitals, which can ultimately affect everyone, even those with private insurance. Reductions in reimbursements for Medicare and Medicaid, reductions in the number of people covered by these programs will push already struggling hospitals like the one I recently worked at, Crozier, further into financial insolvency and lead to closures. And this scenario will affect everyone through longer travel times to the fewer remaining hospitals, to longer wait times when they arrive, and more difficulty in scheduling follow-up appointments at the diminishing number of clinics that are open. This scenario is currently playing out in my home of Delaware County, where Crozier Health, once a struggling four-hospital health system, after it was purchased by private equity, further deteriorated and just recently declared bankruptcy and closed. When this happened, patients flocked to the few remaining facilities and overwhelmed them. It's now become typical for ER wait times at the few remaining hospitals to be 10-plus hours, for critical traumas to be transferred 30 minutes away when seconds matter, and for ambulance response times to have doubled across our county from 20 to sometimes over 40 minutes until an ambulance will come to your door. I'll share with you my last anecdote before wrapping up. Just a day after our hospital closed to incoming trauma, a young man was shot in the chest just a few blocks from the hospital. And if our hospital had been open, we could have saved him, just like we had so many people before. He could have come to our hospital in moments. We would have been able to do our emergency procedures, and I would have anticipated, based on what I understand of the case, his survival. But instead, there was no trauma hospital within 30 minutes. And so after the ambulance got there, they took him to the next closest hospital, and about 20 minutes into his 30-minute travel, his heart stopped and he died. And that didn't have to happen. Mm-hmm. And the reason our hospitals closed is because the kind of reimbursement system, the backbone of which is Medicare and Medicaid, has for years been threatened and deteriorating. And I worry that if this bill passes and Medicare and Medicaid is further deteriorated, that more and more hospitals will be pushed to the brink of closure, and more people will pass away, just like that young man a few weeks ago. This is what healthcare looks like in a healthcare desert, and I don't want any other communities to suffer the way ours is suffering now. So I'll turn it back to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. And I have hospitals in my urban, suburban, and rural area hanging by a thread right now. So thank you for your testimony. We are joined by Fran Held, the Executive Director of Mitzvah Circle. At Mitzvah Circle, Fran and her team have already served more than 300,000 families in the past 5 years by providing basic needs, coaching, and referrals for people in need. Needs that will only be harder for Americans to meet as Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress cut funding for programs like Medicaid and food assistance. Needs that will only be harder to afford as the Trump tariffs hike up the cost of everything from housing to groceries. Fran, we could not be more grateful for the service you and your team are doing to fill the gap and give families an honest shot, to be there for them and to provide them with dignity that they deserve. If Republicans get their way, that very gap will only grow wider. Donald Trump's cost of living crisis will cost families more, leave families with less, and also the very rich, once again, don't have to pay their fair share in taxes. Fran, thank you for being here, and you have 5 minutes.
Co-chairs Kelly, Wasserman, Schultz, and Berrigan, thank you for inviting me to participate in today's roundtable and for your attention to a topic that has been the focus of my professional career. My name is Fran Held, and I'm Mitzvah Circle's founder and executive director. We provide over 100 different necessary products to families in some of Southeastern Pennsylvania's poorest communities. Mitzvah Circle started in my garage 15 years ago because local families were struggling to meet their basic needs. The products we provide aren't covered by governmental programs, so our services fill a critical gap in necessary assistance. And over the last 15 years, I've witnessed the effects of drastically rising cost of living. Last year, the demand for our services more than doubled, which reflects a grim reality. It's getting more difficult for people to meet their basic needs. In 2023, we served 295,010 people, but that number skyrocketed to 597,162 in 2024. A fact I can tell you is in the last 6 months, the average family is asking for many more items. In 2024, the average family requested about 5 boxes per application, but in 2025, it's 7. Each box contains $100 worth of essentials like clothing, shoes, diapers, pads and tampons, and much more. To meet the increased demand, we recently relocated to a warehouse that is triple the size of what we had before. More families are facing financial crises, and these crises are more severe than ever before. I speak to the families every day, and I hear their stories. More than 95% of the families we serve are living below the poverty line and lack the things we all take for granted, like deodorant, socks, shoes, a toothbrush. Nearly 80% of the families that we serve only ask for help once, even though they can reapply every 3 months. Our families don't want to ask for help. They reach out to us because they have nowhere else to turn. And although many of these families confront seemingly insurmountable crises, the vast majority get back on their feet because our services are a bridge to stability. That means trying to help poor families avoid eviction. Although 70% of the people we serve are working, many come to us because they're about to be evicted from their homes. And with our help, families can save $100 on diapers, soap, and tampons, which they then can use to pay their rent. As a result, many of the families we serve manage to avoid another crisis. After all, 1 box of diapers can keep a child in daycare, which can allow their parent to keep their job. Similarly, pads and tampons allow women and girls to go to school and work. In other words, health and wellness being are predicated on meeting basic needs. Research shows that the inability to meet these needs harms physical as well as mental health. And although our staff is lean and our budget is small, we have a meaningful impact on the communities that we serve. In the last year, we've helped more people than in the last 3 years combined in ways that go beyond the basics. In addition to direct-to-door delivery of essentials, we work with 345 partner organizations who receive our purchased items at no cost, which they then distribute to community members who need them most. Without the 100 necessary products that we provide, it is impossible for our families to succeed in school and at work. Poverty is a problem that demands a solution. Cycles of poverty are effectively addressed only when these seemingly small gaps are filled. Thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to any questions.
And now I'd like to recognize Representative Madeleine Dean, our host.
Well, I wanted to say hello, good morning to everybody. I'm delighted to be here at Ursinus. Ursinus always welcomes us, and they're thrilled that you're here, and we're thrilled that you're all here. So thank you to Robin Hannigan and your entire team for always making us feel right at home here, and to talk about this important topic. I am so lucky, and I think you can tell, I am so lucky to work alongside these three remarkable representatives. There's been some funny comments out there that they're all very excited to see you in person because they're so used to seeing you all on TV. So Nanette, Robin, and Debbie, thank you very much for being here, coming from LA and Florida and Illinois, and we're lucky that they would bother to come here, not bother, but choose to come here to talk about what's going on and what can we do about the cost of living. They are all working it extremely well. And then I do want to thank all of you for being here. I've worked alongside many of you. You are powerhouses in your own right, and so you're offering us really good information. Forgive me for being a little late coming in, and I will be going out. We're dealing with an emergency in my office, so I'm going to go back to my office now. But sincerely, thank you, all of you, for being here and helping us cut through the noise and the chaos and the corruption and the cuts to make sense for everyday constituents right here in my 4th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
If I can request a moment to speak out of order and just thank your community's remarkable member of Congress. There is no one who is more ferocious and persistent and relentless. I have the privilege of serving with her as a new member of the Appropriations Committee. She's finally joined us after pursuing that assertively for ever since the first day that she joined the Congress, and we're about to embark on the markup process for the FY26 appropriation cycle, and so these issues right here, where we're putting our money where our mouth is, and making sure that America's values are projected, are championed by your member of Congress every single day. So thank you for having us here.
Thank you, Representative. Thanks everybody.
Well, thank you. Our next guest, we are joined by Commissioner Jamila Winder of Montgomery County. Commissioner Winder is a champion for affordable housing here in Montgomery County. During her time in office, the county has been working hard to provide shelter for people experiencing homelessness, including 2 new transitional housing facilities and an emergency shelter with 120 beds. Food, water, shelter. This is the absolute least people need to survive. Democrats don't just want people to think about how they can survive. We want them to be able to thrive. Unfortunately, Republicans disagree. They don't think health care is a right. They don't seem to care that cutting basic needs programs will leave Americans sick and hungry. And as Trump's cost of living crisis only makes everyday life more unaffordable, they don't seem interested in putting an end to housing insecurity. Commissioner, you are there on the front lines, addressing the cost of living crisis and our housing affordability crisis. Now more than ever, we need your voice and to hear the voice of the far too many Americans who experience homelessness, whether they are here in Montgomery County or anywhere in our country. Thank you for being here today and for your leadership on this housing issue. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. And thank you to our Congresswoman Dean for her continued partnership and her tireless advocacy, and for convening this important discussion today. I also want to recognize the co-chairs. Thank you for traveling from your respective homes to join us. Congresswoman Barragan, Congresswoman Kelly, and Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. I want to thank you for your leadership on the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. It's an honor to be here with all of you. We know that a safe, stable, and affordable home is the foundation upon which families' futures are built. But far too many in Montgomery County, the second wealthiest county in Pennsylvania, and across the nation, that foundation is becoming increasingly out of reach. Despite the important strides we've made, housing instability remains a stubborn and growing challenge. Just last year, data showed that 1 in every 3 residents in Montgomery County is considered housing unstable, spending more than 30% of their income just to keep a roof over their head. That's not sustainable, not for working families, not for our seniors, not for our young professionals trying to put down roots, and certainly not for our most vulnerable friends and neighbors. Since the start of the pandemic, rents have gone up by 15%. Our home prices have surged by 25%, yet wages are not keeping pace. And this isn't just a Montgomery County story, it's a national one. Since 2000, median income in the U.S. has grown by 92%, but housing costs, they've skyrocketed by 177%. Here in Montgomery County, we've estimated that 74,000 households live above the federal poverty line, but below what it truly costs to live here in Montgomery County. That means tens of thousands of people are walking a financial tightrope and are one unexpected bill or emergency away from losing their home. But we are not sitting on our hands in Montgomery County. We've been moving forward with urgency and compassion. We launched our whole home repairs program, providing critical repairs and upgrades for more than 100 families so that they can stay safely in their homes. We've opened 5 new Cold Blue shelters, nearly doubling our capacity to shelter residents during our coldest months. We've opened a new transitional housing facility in Lansdale, creating a dignified space for up to 20 individuals, cutting the number of unsheltered people in that community by as much as 75%. In Pottstown, we've leased 62 rooms at a local hotel to provide safe, temporary housing, and we've just approved funding to grow that to 98 rooms with wraparound services so that folks have the support they need to get back on their feet. And just a few weeks ago, after 6 hours of public testimony at a zoning hearing board, we've worked hard hand in hand with the borough of Norristown to secure a variance that will allow us to open a new 50-bed short-term supportive housing facility. A huge win for people in Montgomery County experiencing homelessness in our county seat. But we know we cannot stop here. We are actively working on a master leasing program where the county would lease 60 homes to provide immediate, stable housing to families in crisis. We are investing in long-term affordable housing development through our Monco Forward Loan Program. So while Montgomery County is doing its part to make life easier and more affordable for our residents, much of our ability is dependent on whether the federal government shares that same concern for the well-being of our most vulnerable friends and neighbors. The reconciliation bill, which passed the U.S. House, as well as the barrage of unlawful executive orders coming from the administration, paint a much bleaker picture on our horizon. Housing costs are a larger driver of the affordability crisis, but so too are healthcare and education. At a time when the cost of everything is going up and there is grave economic uncertainty, the federal government is poised to pull the rug from underneath us locally. Montgomery County has just over 120,000 individuals, or about 14% of our county's population, that are enrolled in Medicaid as of April 2025. The federal budget risks about 10% of those people, about 12,000, losing their health care coverage. At Montgomery County Community College, where I'm proud to sit as a trustee, the elimination of direct subsidized loans for undergraduates and direct plus loans for graduate students will essentially eliminate Pell eligibility for roughly 1,000 students per semester. When we talk about affordability, we're not just talking about numbers. You all know that. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about the single mom trying to make ends meet, the older adult choosing between medication and rent, the veteran, the childcare worker, the young teacher trying to live in the community they serve. The work is hard, but it's also hopeful. And with continued partnership with federal leaders like yourselves, from our municipalities, and from each and every person around this table, we can keep building a Montgomery County where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your testimony. I have a couple questions for a couple of our witnesses. Dr. Cooper, I want to start with you. Huge Medicaid cuts are at the heart of the One Big Ugly Bill, and we know they will have a devastating effect on rural hospitals. Can you talk to us about how costs go up and health outcomes get worse when a hospital closes?
Yes, thank you for the question. Happy to discuss it. So what happens when there's Medicare cuts, Medicaid cuts? How does that affect everyone else? Well, as I discussed in my testimony, many of these safety net hospitals, which include a number of these rural, critical access hospitals, they rely very significantly on Medicare and Medicaid to make ends meet. The hospital that I worked at, Crozier, 80% of the payers that went there were either covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or uninsured. So it's a humongous part of the revenue of the hospital. So when people lose their insurance, when they go from Medicare, Medicaid to uninsured, or if their insurance reimburses less, hospitals like mine that are already struggling financially have less revenue. When they have less revenue, they need to make difficult decisions about potentially closing service lines that are critical to other people, or trying to bill more for the people that have private insurance. And so all of these insurance products, all of these services, all of these hospitals kind of exist in an ecosystem of healthcare. And when you kick one leg out of the stool, the others try to compensate for that, will have oftentimes expensive effects on other people who are trying to get care. So all of these systems interact together. If you reduce funding for one, oftentimes the bill will try to be balanced on others, and so this will affect everyone, regardless of if they're on Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance product.
Thank you. Commissioner, housing costs are making life harder across the board, and we know that. Nationwide, there are rising numbers of people living on the streets. I represent Los Angeles. I see it every day. Can you talk about how the federal government supports your efforts to make housing more affordable and to prevent homelessness?
Absolutely. So we, as a county, have concerns about how do we actually fund some of these innovative programs that we are launching. So the federal government provides significant funding via some of the HUD funding that we get in order for us to run these operations. And so we have more than 500 people sleeping on the streets in Montgomery County at any given time. And I highlighted 3 of the transitional housing programs that we've just recently launched, but that's not going to help us ensure that we have a safe place for those that find themselves unhoused. That's not going to solve the issue. And so really what we rely on is federal grant dollars as well as state grant dollars to help fund these programs. And so we lean on the federal government extensively to ensure that we can deliver these critical services.
Great, thank you.
See, okay, thank you. I wanted to ask, one of my questions deals with one of the biggest things the federal government did over the past ugly bill, takes away tax credits or tax breaks. One of the biggest things the federal government did over the past ugly bill was take away to give tax breaks to big oil. Can you tell us what kind of difference those clean energy tax credits have been making? Can you hear me? Have been making in your community?
So what I would say is we have a lot of people that consider themselves to be middle class, low middle class, and while certainly corporations are running businesses here in Montgomery County, we know that tax breaks for our middle class families are critical to ensuring that they can stay in the places where they call home. It's becoming increasingly more expensive to live right here in Montgomery County. And so when we give tax breaks to the wealthy and not consider those that are just trying to make ends meet, especially those living above the poverty line, we're seeing these challenges in terms of families being able to pay for the critical needs that they have in our community.
And Mike, I don't know if you can answer that because of what you do, giving tax breaks to big oil, and then makes it and taking away from clean energy tax credits in the community.
Sure. So the tax credits in the community provide for, especially on solar. So it's 6%. Every solar developer would get 6%. If you hire local labor and pay prevailing wage and use registered apprentices, you get 5 times that amount. So that's 30%. That's a big amount to make that project go. If that project goes, then the people in the community are working, we have decent jobs, good paying jobs, and can afford to spend in the community. And it's like a snowball effect, right? If that doesn't happen, then the local store doesn't get money, and then they can't pay their bills, and then it just goes downhill from there.
We're all connected.
Yep.
We're all connected. And Fran, the Trump budget calls for huge cuts to housing vouchers and other supports that help families keep a roof over their head. Can you talk about what it would mean for people if they lost their housing vouchers? What would you see in your shop?
So for the people we serve, they're walking on life's edge, right? And we deliver to the door. So we deliver to people living in tents. We deliver to people whose housing is really very unstable. And if everyone's goal is for people to work, right? We all say we want people to work, we want people to go to school, but how can people do that? People can't go to work or school without their basic needs met, right? So if you don't have a pair of shoes, you're not sending your child to school. To the doctor's point, we have families, we have a boy with a brain tumor. The mother wouldn't take him for the MRI. She didn't have soap, right? She was afraid that children and youth would remove her child from the home because she didn't have soap. And so when you're living that close to the edge, it's very hard for families, which is why we try and remove as many of the barriers as we can by delivering to the door, by providing for the entire family, not just children. Because children can go to school, but adults can't go to work if they don't have a bra or a pair of shoes or a coat, right? So you have to look at things in a very holistic way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Fran, my questions focus on the high cost of food especially, and obviously that impacts your organization, although I know you are focused on a much broader array of assistance than that. Food prices have gone up so much. I know when I go food shopping at home, it feels like I can't buy five items. Yeah, I can't buy 5 items for less than $35 or $50 sometimes. It's kind of crazy. And that's making life harder for everyone. I remember during COVID when I was assisting with food distribution lines from local farm shares and food pantries, and you saw some of the cars that came through that were certainly a higher price point than you would expect someone coming through a food distribution line. And so can you talk about the impact on middle-class families who have started to have to look at food banks to make ends meet, and what the kinds of cuts that are being proposed by this administration in this big ugly bill, what kind of an impact that would have more broadly than you would think the population that it would normally affect?
Yeah, it's devastating. And I'm always shocked to look at our numbers and to say 70% of the people are working, 10% of those have 2 jobs or are in school, right? So now we're getting a lot of people who are in nursing school. They said, that's how I'm going to get out of poverty as a single mom with kids. I'm going to go be a nurse. You'll always need nursing. Right. But I'm in school now, and I'm working, and I can't make it work. 1 bag of groceries is all the money I have, whether it's from SNAP or from your own work as a daycare teacher, right? And so we're seeing lots of two-parent families. I think a lot of the stereotypes just don't bear truth. And I think that's something we have to remember. But you can't utilize the food pantry if you don't have a can opener or a cooking pot. That's why we provide them, right? You can't go to school when you don't have pads and tampons for the mom and the 3 girls and they miss a week, right? And then you say, why are the numbers so bad for girls in school? And why is this woman like an unreliable employee at Dunkin' Donuts or is an aide in the kids' classroom, right? Because without those basic needs, those other things are nice to have, but it doesn't matter. You can get the voucher for childcare, right, with CCIS or any of the subsidized childcare platforms, but you can't avail yourself of the childcare if you can't provide diapers, wipes, and a change of clothes. So do we really want people to work and go to school?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Cooper, I'm the ranking member of the Appropriations Subcommittee that funds the whole VA. And, you know, when we think of veterans health care, we think of the VA. But the reality is that so many veterans get a lot of their health care coverage from Medicaid as well. So what would the impact of Medicaid cuts be on veterans in Pennsylvania and across the country?
Thank you for the question. And yes, I get some of my health care through the VA and through veteran centers as well. And so I, in the waiting room, talk with a number of my fellow veterans about this. And as a physician, I, care for a number of veterans at our community hospitals. Our veterans get care at all the same health facilities that we all do. Our clinics in our communities, our hospitals in cities and in the country. And so anytime any hospital, any hospital's finances are threatened, it of course affects veterans just like it affects, all of our neighbors. Especially, some of the veterans that are struggling more, dealing with housing insecurity, dealing with, so many different financial issues. The kind of critical access hospitals that I've made my career kind of serving at, I see a number of those folks kind of slipping through the cracks. And so I worry that our most at-risk hospitals are frequently serving our, most at-risk people. So yes, Medicare and Medicaid, are of critical importance to all of these people.
Thank you.
And now I get to introduce our next guest. With us today is Shannon Isaacs. Shannon serves as Executive Director of the Montco Anti-Hunger Network. At the network, Shannon and her team invest in Montgomery County's food safety net to ensure the county's families are fed, that its children and seniors don't go to bed hungry. There is no more important investment than in the food bank and the pantry system, which serves a critical role in the food safety net, a role that for many families can be the difference between hunger and nourishment, and the difference between barely getting by or finally getting ahead. Everyone here today knows the obvious answer to what would happen if Republicans in Congress would vote to pass Trump's one big ugly bill. It would lead to the largest cut to food assistance in American history. Without food assistance benefits, families would not be able to buy the food they need to survive. They will, without a doubt, turn to food banks and pantries. The chances of these places having enough food available for them will be slim. We have a cost of living crisis that could very well become a hunger crisis thanks to Donald Trump and these Republican cuts. Shannon, thank you for joining us today and for the work that you do. I yield the floor to you.
Thank you all so much for having me here today, and thank you so much for your leadership on making sure that each American has enough to eat, has a roof over their head, and has the basic things they need to literally stay alive. I'm Shannon Isaacs. I'm the Executive Director of the Montco Anti-Hunger Network. We are the backbone organization addressing food insecurity in Montgomery County. We're a coalition of 73 food pantries, free meal providers, and food banks, and we do systemic change work on food security. We provide emergency food, which we've doubled over the past 2 years, and we do collaboration And I will say briefly that backbone organizations are an opportunity to exponentially address food insecurity without just the straight cost of the bottom line of food, which is so high these days. So thank you all so much. The United States, through the development of stacking financial stressors impacting the lowest Americans, including inflation, the economic impacts of COVID, which disproportionately impacted the lowest income Americans, rapid cuts to social services, and stagnating wages, is creating a severe cost of living program, which is, of course, why we're all here today. Hand in hand with that cost of living program is a growing food insecurity crisis that we are seeing unfold here and around our country. I think you can take Montgomery County as a case study for what happens when cost of living goes up exponentially, that food insecurity with it goes up exponentially. We've seen food insecurity here in Montgomery County go up much more rapidly than in the United States as a whole. With the rising cost of food and living, fewer and fewer people in our area have enough to eat without assistance. To address this cost of living program, we need to take a few critical steps. First, we must change how we define economic success in the United States. Second, we have to recognize the impacts of these federal policy shifts that are going too far, too fast, reducing the safety net for the most economically vulnerable Americans. And these life-saving programs that we have to support, like Medicaid, LAHEAP, Social Security, SNAP, WIC, TFAP, along with we need to support economy-boosting measures that alleviate poverty, like minimum wage increases. We need to start reaching into international aid, and we need to join sources like the World Food Program and others that will prevent, and we need to end federal barriers in the United States to accepting foreign aid. Supporting job-creating programs, including entrepreneurship incentives and incentives for living wage jobs, are also critical to the health and stability of the American economy. Food insecurity and cost of living is a keystone issue. When children do not have enough to eat, as is the case with rapidly rising food insecurity nationally, they cannot do their best work in schools. Adults cannot plan their lives. You can't go to nursing school or start a business when you don't have enough to eat. Cost of living and the intertwined issues of poverty, food insecurity, education, healthcare, and housing cannot be separated. However, we're not without a few powerful policy levers. Here's what I think we can do. First, we need to change the economic success definitions in the United States. As we contend with legislation that will do incredible harm to the lowest income Americans, we need to be keeping a closer eye on the economic well-being indicators related to poverty. Our current definitions of national economic health do not pay enough attention to economic vulnerability. We are always asking the question, what is the median household income? How is the S&P 500 doing? How is the NASDAQ doing? We need to add to that list, what is the 10th percentile and 25th percentile of American household income? We need to start taking indicators from the United Nations regarding the evaluation of poverty for middle and lower income countries, because should SNAP be cut, we will be moving to an America where going hungry at higher rates than we see in the rest of the developed world. We need to match these statistics regarding the 10th percentile and 25th percentile of American households with cost of living statistics and living wage statistics and take a hard look at the gap. The American dream is not just about everyone having opportunity, it's about having enough to stably access that opportunity. Second, and I'll try to be brief, we expect rising food insecurity in Montgomery County and nationally due to the combination of inflation and federal policy shifts. The rising cost of living driven by tariffs and price gouging, combined with the federal government moving too far, too fast on social supports, is a critical issue. All of the programs we all care about have an incredible impact. I think there's also a lot of ability to work with a combination of federal and local actors. Locally, Commissioner Widener supported $500,000 in food purchasing credits that's about to be launched, which is going to be a critical lifeline given our cost of living issues here in Montgomery County. Finally, we need to utilize a combination of free market levers, accurate economic analysis of non-free market levers. For instance, supporting competition among grocery stores to get down price gouging. When I lived in Syracuse, New York, the price of groceries, that's just 3 hours from here, the price of groceries was half at the same grocery store chain. They are charging more because they know they can charge more, and people are going hungry over it. And that's just free market competition. We need to not have these high tariffs without very careful consideration. Congresswoman Dean mentioned we cannot build bananas here in the United States. These tariffs are really going to impact cost of living. And finally, we need to be applying what we know about economic analysis to non-free market policy levers. The research is clear. The demand for labor is inelastic. Increasing the minimum wage does not increase unemployment. Study after study demonstrates this. What we've seen here in Montgomery County over the past 3 years is extreme rises in food insecurity and food shortages at food pantries that correspond to the dual combination of SNAP cuts and inflationary pressures. Last year, 52% of food pantries in Montgomery County, the second wealthiest county in Pennsylvania, reported having food shortages so severe that they turned people away. This is what we expect to happen with SNAP cuts should they come to pass, and for those issues to get worse. We're talking about children and seniors as well. Finally, I think we need to come together as Americans and as Pennsylvanians to protect the most vulnerable. Addressing this cost of living crisis is critical to addressing food insecurity, and I think we need to change what is the measures of success and impact of our government by measuring how we protect and how we support the most vulnerable. Thank you all so much again for all your incredible leadership in addressing poverty and insecurity. It just makes such a huge difference, and we see it every day translated into people having enough to eat here in Montgomery County.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And to echo our colleague, Congresswoman Dean, what's going on in this country under this administration is bananas. So this morning we're joined by Mike Gazer, an international representative for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, District 3. When Democrats held the White House and had control of Congress, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest ever clean energy investment in our nation's history. Now that Republicans are in power, their energy plan is as wrong as it is short-sighted. They want to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. Leaders from across IBEW are on the ground right now, urging Republicans in Congress to protect these clean, affordable energy investments that would be eliminated if Donald Trump's big ugly bill became the law of the land. If these Republicans bend the knee to Donald Trump and eliminate the Inflation Reduction Act's energy tax credits, it will be a major blow to Pennsylvania workers and their families. Energy costs will go up, union jobs in clean energy will go down. American energy projects like wind, solar, and battery storage would be forced to be canceled. Fewer jobs, less energy, and higher costs. That's not an agenda we should ever get behind. Mike, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Mike Geiser. I'm an international representative for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. The IBEW represents over 850,000 members in the United States and Canada, and I am the Renewable Energy Government Affairs Coordinator for the 3rd District, which is Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. I'd like to thank the representatives for inviting me and appreciate the opportunity to speak today on what the repeal of the IRA tax credits included in the House Reconciliation Bill will mean for not only IBEW members, but all Americans. Repealing tax incentives on energy-related infrastructure projects will result in rising energy costs and the loss of good-paying jobs. Provisions in the IRA provide tax incentives to pay prevailing wage, as I had spoke before, of the area and use of registered apprentices. This helps with the hiring of local labor. These are jobs that support families and communities where they live. Developers have time and money invested in these projects that are ready for development or already have begun. They have planned on tax incentives for the project. If the credit goes away, so may the project. On the labor side, we plan ahead so that we have trained manpower necessary for these projects. We train our apprentices in advance so that when a project is ready to start, they are ready and available. If a project gets canceled, so is the work opportunity. In recent years, investments in clean energy have created good-paying jobs that helped drive down the cost of energy. The demand for energy is increasing. I think we've seen it all over the country. The increase in the amount of data centers that are going in and other manufacturing facilities increase the need for power. We all have power plants that have been closed down, or a nuclear facility that has been closed down. How do you replace that power to fill the need for all those data centers? Here in Pennsylvania, there are large-scale data centers proposed or underway. In New York, the Micron chip plant will need a tremendous amount of power. Some of the power that goes to New York comes from Pennsylvania. When a new facility is built and creates new jobs in the area, the average person isn't thinking about how the power demand may affect them. Wind, solar, and battery storage are the key to meeting that demand. They're faster and cheaper than other options. Without energy sources, the American can see their bills rise. In the auto industry, U.S. manufacturers have invested in new technologies and facility upgrades to produce electric vehicles and hire new workers. With this bill as it stands, many of those workers would lose their jobs, as well as the installation of future charging stations, which puts members to work, right? And the current owners of electric vehicles, or prospective owners, are waiting for those charging stations because it makes it easier for them to get around. These are just a few of the reasons I'm here today to ask for your support. Keep the IRA provisions to protect electricity costs for consumers, preserve the jobs that have already or will be created in the future in the clean energy industry. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to introduce Sabrina Taylor. Sabrina is an early childhood education and organizational leadership professional. She works in support of parents and kids everywhere and how they navigate basic needs programs and threats to programs like Head Start. It wasn't too long ago that Sabrina was fighting her battle with cancer, a battle we're so grateful she's won. Great. Throughout that fight, however, Susan felt the pain that is the all too high cost of living in America. She had to juggle the rising cost of health care, utilities, groceries, and basic needs, all without having paid leave. For moms facing times of hardship, basic need programs like Medicaid and food assistance are absolutely essential to the health care and well-being of their families. We must defend these programs in the face of radical Republican cuts. Sabrina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I want to extend thanks to Representative Dean and each of the co-chairs here today. Thank you so much for holding this hearing and for all that you're doing to fight for working people. Again, my name is Sabrina Taylor, and I'm a proud member of Moms Right. I live in Willow Grove, Montgomery County. I've been working in the early childhood education field for more than 2 decades, helping and inspiring children as well as people in general to reach their full potential is a passion, one of my greatest passions. Like pretty much every working person, I know firsthand the challenges of trying to make ends meet when the prices of groceries, housing, utilities, healthcare, and other essentials continue to soar. I hold a doctorate in organizational leadership, and I've always been in the workforce. But despite that, it feels impossible to get ahead. My employer provides a small cost of living raise each year, but it doesn't come close to meeting skyrocketing costs. Despite working full-time and having an advanced degree, for a long time, I've had to split up my bills. For example, I'll pay half of my car note with one paycheck and then the rest with the next paycheck. The high cost of living forces everyday people to live on the brink, just trying to make it paycheck to paycheck and being unable to save for emergencies. As mentioned earlier, the past few years have been especially difficult as I face one of those emergencies. In 2023, January of 2023, I turned 40 years old, and we know that 40 years old for women marks a significant age to get special health screenings. I had my first mammogram just 4 days following my 40th birthday. And unbeknownst to me at that time, that would begin a significant health journey in my life. I was diagnosed with breast cancer just weeks later. By the end of 2023, I was also diagnosed with another cancer called low-grade appendiceal mucinous neoplasm, which is a very rare but deadly type of cancer. Additionally, from the age of 10 years old, I suffered with endometriosis. And during my radiation therapy, my endometriosis became much more severe and cause debilitating pain. 2023 and 2024 were by far the hardest 2 years of my life, and it wasn't just difficult emotionally and physically, it was financially devastating as well. It's no secret that healthcare costs in this country are completely out of control. I have health insurance through my employer, but between doctor's visits, MRIs, biopsies, hospitalizations, and surgeries, I faced hundreds of dollars in copays and thousands of dollars in hospital bills. I had to utilize a payment plan, and I'm still financially behind. Because our country has failed to adopt paid family and medical leave, while I was being treated for cancer and facing skyrocketing health care costs, I lost significant income. I had 5 surgeries between 2023 and 2024. And in addition to those surgeries, I was in constant severe pain. I had no choice but to take time from work. But I didn't have paid leave. While I had the option to leave, take family medical leave, it was not paid. I had paid into a short-term disability plan, but it didn't cover my full cap salary, and it wasn't nearly enough to cover rent, car payment, utilities, and other basics. I'm grateful that I'm sorry, I'm trying not to get emotional. I'm grateful that I'm now in remission, but now I carry significant debt. It's hard to catch up, especially with the cost of food, utilities being so high, and as Trump's tariffs threaten to drive costs even higher. It's enormously frustrating because health emergencies shouldn't force working people into financial crisis. It shouldn't be this hard for working people to get by, to care for themselves, and contribute to their communities. Yet, instead of delivering the relief we need, the Republican budget package will actually raise health care and other costs for millions of people, all to pay for tax breaks for billionaires and huge corporations, and that's just unacceptable. Finally, I want to speak briefly about the rising costs of child care and early education. As I mentioned before, ensuring young learners to get quality education they deserve is a passion of mine. Through my work, I see how the rising cost of child care harms families in my community every single day. I read that child care costs rose 29% from 2020 to 2024. That means so many young children are losing out on educational opportunities when their brains are developing rapidly. It forces parents to work. It forces parents out of their workforce and into hardship. And even so, most of us in the early education workforce are not paid living wages. We need policymakers to invest in child care to solve these challenges, because child care deserves to thrive and children deserve to thrive. Thank you for fighting for a national budget that puts working people first, not billionaires and big business. Our communities are counting on Congress to invest in policies that lower the cost of living and help working families make ends meet. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing such a personal story. Thank you. Shannon, cuts to SNAP and other food assistance programs are one of the worst parts of the one big ugly bill. How would your food bank be impacted by these cuts, and would you have to turn away clients?
Absolutely, we would need to turn away clients. We already are turning away clients, and it would just cause an exponential harm. I mean, it's a huge percentage. Some people say 8, some people say 9 of the emergency meals that are consumed here originate originally from the federal government. So these individuals are being hit from every angle. It's not that the SNAP is being reduced, like HEAP is frozen. With Medicaid, it's the same pool of money they're having to pay.
Sure.
So we would absolutely be at a position where we would be turning people away, and that has all kinds of impacts on children and families.
Definitely, thank you. And Mike, can you talk about some of the clean energy projects that you and your union brothers and sisters have worked on, have helped lower energy bills for people in Pennsylvania and the region?
Sure. There's currently, I think, that we're targeting probably 10 or 15 major solar projects just in Pennsylvania alone that are somewhat dependent on what happens with the tax credits. So those projects haven't started. There are some that have started, but most of them, because it takes so long to develop and get through the permitting process, they're on the cusp of getting ready to start. I've already looked at some so far recently that are in suspend mode because I think that's what they're waiting on. You know, they've already passed some of the permitting. They might be just waiting on a few things, but it's suspended because of the cost, right? It's still cheaper and faster and easier to put in a solar project or a wind farm. Now, wind farms were pretty popular, and they did a bunch, and then all of a sudden they started to slow down. There are still some of it that are set to go. Same thing, right? We don't know what's going to happen with them, even offshore wind, right, which then comes into the area. Like I said, not only because of plants that have shut down, even in New York, the power comes from Pennsylvania. One of the proposed mega solar projects is supposed to feed directly to New York. So Pennsylvania is more than just Pennsylvania. It also feeds other areas. You know, and they do bring in power from Canada because, as I said, plants have shut down. New plants have shut down. Older power plants have shut down because of the cost to keep them running. And now, what do you do when you're putting all this demand on for new power and you don't have a way to supply that? That just means the average person, supply and demand, right? The average person, consumer, is going to pay more money for the power.
One of my former employees is in the solar business, and I just saw him the other day, and he's had a very worried look on his face. Very worried look.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sabrina, Dr. Taylor. I am a 17-year breast cancer survivor, diagnosed when I was 41. One day I was the picture of health. The next day I was doing a self-exam in the shower and found a lump that had not been there before. And subsequent to my diagnosis, which thankfully was early stage, I found out that I was the carrier of the breast cancer genetic mutation. I'm a BRCA2 breast cancer mutation carrier. 7 surgeries over the course of 15 months. The most hellacious year of my life, 2008. So I know exactly what you're talking about. The question I want to ask you is, part of the cuts in the big ugly bill would actually cut premium tax credits in the Affordable Care Act, meaning that there's about $500 million that would be cut out of the Affordable Care Act, which would impact the ability to make Affordable Care Act policies more affordable. Mammograms are free. Preventive care is free as a result of Affordable Care Act policies. So what kind of an impact do you think that the cuts like that in Medicaid for patients like you and I, and patients less fortunate even than you or I, what kind of an impact when you're facing that kind of devastating diagnosis and trying to figure out how you're going to string together all those co-pays and manage the appointments that you have to have? I mean, I don't think people understand how your entire life blows up when you are facing a cancer diagnosis, and that the only thing that you're really able to focus on is living, is being able to survive. So what kind of an impact on cancer patients do you think these proposed cuts will have?
It's almost very terrible to think about. It's devastating. Like you said, during those moments, you're so focused on living. I was very specific with who I told during that time in my life, because unfortunately, when you hear cancer, people automatically assume, oh no, she's dying.
Yep.
And so I was very strategic. I informed my immediate family,
Yeah.
and then people who I knew would be prayerful and positive, as opposed to, you know, those who would just think the worst and hold that negative energy. And it's unfortunate that I tried to jot down the name of the person who shared the response. It was a response of a Republican that you shared earlier.
Joni Ernst.
That said, we're all going to die anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that type of response would make people in that case almost succumb to that, because if they don't have access to the MRIs, they don't have access to the mammograms and those things, how will they ever? It's just
it's incomprehensible.
It's awful. It leaves people with no choice but to almost wallow in that self-pity, and that doesn't help a situation when you're sick and when you find out your mentality, your mindset, your mental health begins to decrease. All of that is connected. And so without the free mammograms and the free visits, it's almost like you're doomed. I was very early. They caught mine early.
Same.
Although it resulted in all those surgeries and
It's
things
still
like
terrible.
that. It's still terrible.
It's still terrible.
It's
10
still
years,
ter-
I had the same thing.
Terrible.
7 surgeries.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter early. It just means you
it's
might
a
not
total
die.
nightmare.
But it's terrible.
It's terrible.
And it's terrible if you have a social network and you have people.
Yes.
But we have people that we serve, and thousands of them with serious health issues. I have a 24-year-old single mom that we're helping with breast cancer.
Right.
2 little kids, can't work, didn't have diapers, put her kids in daycare to go to appointments, please. The
Yeah.
whole thing.
Exactly. I had all the support that I could possibly muster.
And it's still horrible.
It was
Horrible.
the most devastating thing. And you and I have never
Nobody
met.
understands it.
We've never met.
Right.
We did not speak before this meeting. I also told no one, except only the people that I absolutely needed to know.
Yeah.
Because once you're diagnosed with cancer, it defines you.
Yeah.
I
People
didn't
feel
want to
you.
be known as Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's currently battling breast cancer.
Yes.
It was all I could do to pull. I had very young children. It was all I could do to pull myself together. If you add the burden of not being able to afford your care,
Yep.
it's killing people.
Yeah.
They are going to kill people. And like you said, mentally, people will succumb. They will just give up.
Yep.
Because if you've got your bill, all the other bills that you're talking about, and your job that puts pressure on you because you know you have to be there, they have to hold on to your job for 12 weeks. The evil, the cruelty, that at the callous disregard for people's life, and no matter where you are on the economic spectrum, but if you are struggling financially, this is no question going to put people in graves.
For sure. It's
I'm
a
sorry.
big, ugly bill. Big, ugly.
Like I said, I can't believe we have literally nearly identical stories. Okay, thank you so much
But
for
nobody
sharing.
understands it
No, nobody
until you
under-
understand it.
That's
like,
right.
It's not something you can tell somebody. Oh, I get it. You really
No,
don't.
you really don't.
Yeah.
It's a club, a sisterhood. We're glad we're in it because we're here to talk about it.
Yes.
But you don't wish it on anybody. Mike, I want to just ask you, federal clean energy investments are creating jobs across the country. I can tell you I drive an EV, and when my husband and I have driven long distances, some of the promises of how long those batteries last fall a bit short of the actual length, and you find yourself needing to get to a charging station, and some of them are pretty few and far between depending on where you are. I have an appropriations grant that I got for one of my cities that they were planning to use to install, a full charging, set of chargers, and the Trump administration cut off their grant and put it on hold, even though it's law. It's essentially impoundment. And the big ugly bill cuts those investments as well. So what does that mean for union workers like the IBEW workers you represent, but also for our ability to make advancements in trying to be able to have more productivity and address the overall impact of growing jobs in that new part of the automobile industry?
Yes. So yeah, we train people so that they can install these properly, so that they're safe. And part of that bill, as you said, there's parts for clean buses, school buses, all that was funded, which is now on hold. So some of the school bus projects have gone through because they got on early and got their grant, but others haven't. And the same thing with, you go down the highways. How many charging stations do you see along the highways? You really have to search them out. And part of that bill was to make more charging stations. And like I said earlier in my comments, that people that are anticipating purchasing an electric vehicle, we're counting on that to happen, because like you said, they don't last as long as they say they last, right? And then the weather affects it. The colder it is, the less time it happens that they'll last. And also part of the tax credits are for individuals to pay for your charging station or part of your vehicle that no longer will be available. So I think, and then it trickles down, right? So now we go back again to the worker that's working for the American auto industry that's producing these vehicles. They're going to make less vehicles. Those people are all trained to do that, and the same thing with the companies. They invested a lot of money to be able to produce batteries, and then, in the development of future batteries. There's grants that are out there, that part of the grants were out there to help develop batteries that last longer. Where does that all go? So it definitely makes it harder for the individual, and it makes less work opportunities for IBW members that we represent.
Thank you.
Shannon, I had a meeting with my school superintendents and higher ed actually also. And, we know that kids come to school to eat their meals, but I never thought about, one of my school superintendents said some of the kids, all three of their meals come from school because of the way the program set up. School lasts long. They have after-school programs and that kind of thing. Can you talk about, it sounds like 18 million kids could be ineligible for meals when they go to school. That's devastating.
Well, I think if you care about the functioning of our education system, you have to care about school meals. Kids can't do schoolwork in schools. They can't learn unless they have access to school meals. We're taking action here in Montgomery County. Mont-Quanton Hunger Network is partnering with Montgomery County to bring together educators and food pantries to start planning for a paradigm where there's reduced school meals, because we're going to need to have more access to emergency food in schools. But it's just, school meals are a backbone of this country's access to opportunity.
Definitely. And that'll happen, and then Dr. Cooper will see more kids in the emergency room because they're starving. Exactly. And then last question is for you, Dr. Taylor, about childcare. I remember a long time ago how expensive childcare was for me. I was a single mom with 2 children also in school and that kind of thing. Can you talk to us about what is going to happen with shutting down, Head Starts and not helping with childcare?
Well, already many Head Start programs have shut down, and now you put people in the situation where those who were working are now unable to work because all Head Start programs are free programs, and so to have a person who wasn't working or have now lost their jobs due to this crisis, they can't afford a $300 or $400 a week child care program. So I think that in the case of losing these programs, people will eventually lose their jobs if they had them. They will lose their homes. They will lose everything. And it's hard to come back from that. It's really hard for working parents or non-working parents to pick up in those cases. You were just sharing that when children go to school, they rely on meals there. So if the parents are unable to provide meals, at least they know that their children are eating breakfast, snacks, lunch, and dinner in some of these programs. They come home, they may not have to worry about preparing a full meal, and that's unfortunate that that's not an option for some people, but all of it is really connected. They miss everything.
And then just
Our governor, actually, the last 2 summers, Ron DeSantis, refused to take the federal school breakfast benefit for the summers. Inexplicable.
And then also what you find, my last comment is that so people can work depending on how old their kids are, they leave their kids home.
Yeah,
Alone too.
that's
which
true.
is
That's true.
sad.
And then I think because Head Start is an income-based program, if you make too much, then you lose it. And if you make too much, it's still not enough to afford regular childcare.
Exactly.
And so it's all the way around is really chaotic.
Thank you.
Really is. Well, we want to thank USINUS College for being really gracious hosts, and all of our witnesses for taking the time out to share your stories, because we really have to put human faces and human experiences on the impact of these outrageous, heinous cuts. Donald Trump's cost of living crisis is only going to get worse if he and Republicans in Congress jam their big ugly bill through. It's a bill that will take health care away from 16 million people and take food out of the hands of and mouths of hungry families. A bill that would add $2.4 trillion to our national deficit while leaving Americans sicker, hungrier, and poorer. And for what exactly? Most people won't like the answer because it's grotesque. It's also Republicans can give more tax breaks to their richest donors. This big ugly bill has some big ugly consequences for families here in Pennsylvania and across the country. We want to thank the guests who joined us today and shared firsthand accounts of how they are working to address the all too high cost of living. We have more to do to expand affordable health care, build affordable housing, and close the obvious gap in basic needs, even in the second wealthiest county in Pennsylvania. And we have to start by blocking extreme cuts to basic needs programs like Medicaid and food assistance. We have to stop this big ugly bill, and that can happen in the United States Senate. So people need to communicate with their senators to ensure that they vote no. Our work is going to continue, and this meeting of the Steering and Policy Committee is hereby adjourned.
Thank you.